Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. Welcome everybody, and we have many people online. Welcome everybody to this year's Keng Swee lecture on modern China. We are delighted to have Dr. Zhu Min as a speaker today. I will introduce him formally in a moment, but for now I give the floor to Dr. Teh Kok Peng, who is the chairman of the board of the East Asian Institute. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Bert. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on the time zone you're in. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this year's Keng Swee lecture. I would like to thank Dr. Zhu Min for kindly agreeing to deliver this lecture. Dr. Zhu is an old friend, although we have not met for quite a while. It is good to see him again, at least virtually. The Keng Swee lecture on modern China is named after Singapore's former Deputy Prime Minister. Dr. Goh was one of the founding fathers of the Singapore Republic and the architect of its renowned financial and economic management. Together with Lee Kuan Yew, Dr. Goh led Singapore's early engagement with China. This East Asia Institute in its current form was established in 1997. What may be less well known is that it was originally established by Dr. Goh in 1983 as the Institute of East Asian Philosophies, IEAP, primarily to study and promote Confucian philosophy and ethics. After his retirement from politics in 1984, Dr. Goh was appointed economic advisor to China's top leadership from 1985 to 1990. His close involvement with China's economic development and policy thinking led him to change the Institute's research direction towards the political, economic, and social development of contemporary China, and subsequently to other East Asian countries as well. This led to a rebranding and to the Institute's present name. Today's lecture, the role of public policy in addressing complex social problems, is very much in the spirit of Dr. Goh. Climate change is truly a global challenge, and it will take all the ingenuity and political will of policymakers, businesses, and people around the world to tackle it. China is the center of this challenge. The country is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, but also the largest producer of renewable energy, the biggest market for electric vehicles, and one of the key drivers behind the UNFCCC Paris Agreement on climate change in 2015. Since Paris, China has raised its already ambitious targets to address greenhouse emissions. Realizing President Xi Jinping's commitment to net zero emission by 2016, made in the UN General Assembly in 2020, is crucial if the world is to avoid dangerous levels of global warming. Dr. Chu has titled his lecture Paradigm Shift. Clearly, achieving the targets set by China and other countries at the Glasgow Climate Change Conference last year will require major transformations in our economic structure and way of life. In his abstract for this lecture, which some of you may have, Dr. Chu mentions China's aspiration towards achieving harmony between man and nature. This is a phrase commonly used in Taoism. If indeed China seeks to achieve harmony between man and nature, in this paradigm shift, she would be drawing upon an ancient philosophy that is still deeply embedded in her culture. I look forward very much to Dr. Zhu's insight in this lecture. Finally, but not very importantly, EAI gratefully acknowledges the support of the late Professor Swee for the Keng Swee lecture series. Back to you, Bert.
Thank you very much, Dr. Teh. And I have not introduced myself yet. My name is Bert Hofman. I'm the director of the East Asian Institute. And once again, welcome. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Zhu Min. He is currently the chairman of the National Institute of Finance Research at Tsinghua University and the vice chairman of the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. And he's also an envoy of the Sino-UK Professional and Financial Services for the Belt and Road Initiative. He's a member of the 14th Five-Year Plan Expert Committee, the committee that met just before the plan to advise the senior leadership on the plan, of which, of course, climate change is an important part. He's a member of the Foreign Policy Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a member of the Expert Advisory Committee of the State Internet Information Office. He's also on the board of trustees of Fudan University and the World Economic Forum and the Patterson Institute of International Economics. Zhu Min previously served as Deputy Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Deputy Governor of the People's Bank of China, and Executive Vice President of the Bank of China. And he was also with the World Bank, and that's where I met him a very, very long time ago. I won't disclose how long ago, but a very long time ago. And he taught economics at both Johns Hopkins University and Fudan University. He's got his PhD, an MA from Johns Hopkins, an MPA from Woodrow Wilson School, and a BA in economics from Fudan University. Dr. Zhu Min will speak today on paradigm shifts, long tides, and vast waves of China's 2060 carbon neutrality development. One household announcement. If you have questions, please use the Q&A. I will read out your questions. I will sometimes amalgamate the questions so that we can have a great discussion after Dr. Zhu Min's lecture. He will talk for about 45 minutes, as he said in advance. And with that, I hand over to Dr. Zhu Min.
Well, thank you, Bert, and also thank you, Dr. Peng, and for the invitation and also for the warm welcome and kind words of introduction. It is indeed a great honor and a pleasure for me to talk this very distinguished lecture series. Today, we'll talk one issue in the heart of Chinese economy, and also in global issue as well, which is climate change and carbon neutrality. Let me bring my PPT. Okay, can you see the PPT?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's good. So the title is a paradigm shift, the long tides and the fast waves of China's 2060 carbon neutrality. Because it's 2060, right? It's got to be a long tide, but I expect to see, in the time we'll have a faster waves and mostly innovation wave and a technology change wave and all of the policy change wave as well during the process. So this is my title. I'm going to talk roughly 5 issues. The one issue I call it a paradigm shift, why it is. Then followed by the most important and challenging issue, the energy revolution, and for China, because China depends on coal, in a very high way, more than 60% as a major energy sources. And the third is we reshaping the whole economy, and when you change the energy, supply, you change the whole economy, and also a broad technology innovation, which is really the drive force for the whole thing. And finally, I will talk about building a net zero financial system, which is the key part to support the whole transformation of the process, but also in some way will lead the process, because where the money goes, the economic activity runs, right? So those are the 5 issues I would like to talk. Given the time limitation, I will not be able to go to too details, but I'm more than happy and open for the further discussion with you in the Q&A session. The first issue is a paradigm shift. Chairman Xi Jinping of China committed, China's carbon neutrality in 2060 in 2020 UN General Assemblies, right? Also specifically make clear by 2030, when we are peaked, and so the carbon emission per units of GDP will drop quite a bit, 65%, and compared with 2005, and the proportion of a non-fossil energy in primary resource consumption will reach about 25 a quarter, and the forest storage will increase by 6 million cubic meters over 2005, and our total installed capacity of the wind power and the solar power generation will reach more than 1.2 billion kilowatts. So those are the grand commitment China made, and also the target China made for ourselves in 2030. This commitment is very much driven by two things. One is international trend. You see, in international, China is a major, and emitter. China's emission for the carbon, which is more than 10 billion, right? It's accounted roughly 1/3. Although per capita carbon emission, China is still relatively low because low GDP level, but also it's on the upside. But also with domestic reasons, there's a efficiency and economic transformation need. If you're looking for China, the emission per units of GDP, this is by 2019, China is really 0.69 kg per US dollar GDP, which is roughly 3 times of a Japan level and 2 times of US level, and roughly 2 times, a little bit of 1.7 times of global level. So that means the energy efficiency level in China is low. And relatively, when China move into a high income stages and labor productivity become more important, improve the efficiency, particularly energy consumption efficiency is also important. So this is also domestic driven. But this is a huge challenge. The challenge in few dimensions. The first dimension is time, it's the speed. You will see China's carbon emission will peak at 30, will quickly drop down to 50 and to 60, right? We did a 50 because we tried to see how 50 will be, then leave 10 years for last stage adjustments. This is a pretty short time. This is only 30 years, or 20, 30 years after peak. Think about Europe. Their carbon emission peaked in 1990. They target 2050 for the carbon neutrality. So they have a total 60 years to run through the whole process. We all know the neutrality is much more challenging because this is the way you try to fossil energy and change all the production methods as well. So this is a very challenging, and China have only 30 years. So this is the big challenge. There are even bigger challenges on the other ways. You will see on this chart, the blue lines is forecasting China GDP. We expect the China GDP will double around 2035. And once again, will double again around 2050. So around 2050, Chinese GDP probably will be 4 times of today's level. But if you're looking for the primary energy consumption, more or less will be the same. So energy efficiency got to be improved in a very dramatic way. But more importantly, you will see the carbon emission will gradually from 2020 level drop to almost 0. Yeah, left roughly 1 billion for the carbon sink and all other Western method to offsetting some residuals. This is a huge challenge. I think the key challenge China facing to reach the carbon neutrality, one is a short time space. Another one is that China still have rather strong or moderate growth for the next 30, 40 years. with a rather strong growth, you need a cutting the energy consumption and cutting the carbon emission to almost zero. It's a huge task. So the space between these two lines, this is a very much efficiency game. And between these two lines is very much technology innovation. Obviously, this is also technology innovation. So technology innovation and efficiency game will play a huge role in the process. I think that's the whole nature of this carbon neutrality. But we see there are also opportunities for China. Because when we start early transformations and conducive to reduced transformations replacements cost, for example, into the car, right? In the US, when they peak Europe, per 1,000 people, they have a car stock already 845 at 423 and already, right? But China today is only 173. So when China moved to 500, for example, per 1,000 people at the Japan and the Europe level, I don't think we'll be able to reach to US level. So the gap will be filled by the electric car, not the gas car, right? And the second issue, we see China economic growth rate is relatively high, which create a market to absorb the more innovation and green productions. And also China is accumulating a certain amount of green technology as well. And particularly China do have advantage in digital technology to help green development. And the digital technology can help by various studies can help reduce the emission on the roughly from 17 to 37% will play a very important role. So it's a digitalization process and institutional and policy capacity and a strong government organization and a coordination ability, which also will be a strong force to form the consensus and for really the implementation of the whole thing. So we do see we have the opportunity here. So, but we do also understand this is a paradigm shift in the sense we have to rethink the purpose of development of go beyond the GDP. It's not a physical production, right? We see the four types of capital: physical capital, human capital, social capital, and nature capital. So we have to bring, as Dr. Peng mentioned, the harmony between the human and the nature. And we have to bring this four capital and working together and understand at the end of the day, so we not only change the total production, but also the lifestyle. I think this is the most important consumption pattern and also change the value proposition. Because we want all the Chinese economy move into a green, more eco and friendly and economic and the social model. So this is a real paradigm shift because fundamentally change almost everything, particularly change the value proposition since the Industrial Revolution happened roughly 400 years in UK. So then we see there's a new 40 years for us. We see the first 40 years, 1978 to 2020, is the Chinese economic reform opening days, which is very much to follow the path of a traditional industrialization model. So it's just a catch up, right? But now looking for the future as a green development model, we see there's a chance we can lead the world and we will bring in the global shared prosperities and in some way some experience. So next 40 years will be more exciting, more interesting, I think, for China. So that's a reason made a commitment. Also, we think it's a paradigm shift. So follow that, the most challenging is energy revolution. Because China heavily depends on coal, right? So we made the target in the 14 years, 5-year plan, that is by 2025. And energy intensity, which is the key issues, will decrease by low as 14%. and the non-fossil energy reach about 20%. CO2 intensity by GDP decrease roughly by 20% in 5 years, and the CO2 emissions we target to below 10.5 billion tons, right? The key issue that I feel is really offsetting the increase in CO2 emissions brought about by economic growth with a decrease in the energy efficiency of a GDP. I think this is very important issues. Improved efficiency and also very important. Conserve and the conservation of energy, upgrading industrial technology, and also as very important issues, renewable energy source, and I think those all the issues behind that. But the most important thing is we try to use energy efficiency improvements to offset increasing energy consumption due to the economic growth. I think that's the most strong and important base assumption. Coal. China consumes more than 50% of global coal, and China nearly depends on 60% of coal as a domestic primary energy consumptions. Because China heavily depends on coal, China has a very biased industry structure, right? China really have a steel industry, cement production, glasses, all account for about 50% of global production. Because coal, fire power, and it's relatively still a big scale and cheaper, which also very inefficiency. In 2020, China's GDP accounted for 18% of the world GDP, but energy consumption accounted for 25%, and the carbon emission accounted for about 30% global. So it's a very clear, and this inefficiency issue is a big issue. So how do we reduce the coal? I think the whole thing is by 2025, power generation will no longer increase. We still have a 5 year because we still have some on constructions of coal power generations. We probably will have to complete this project, but no more new. And by 30, the coal power construction will stop, and during the 15th, and replacement stock of coal power begin in 2030. So when we peak, we will start to do the replacements, right? And this is and the non-fossil energy power generation increase to more than 50%, which is also very, very important. And achieve net zero in coal industry by 2050. So because we need the power and the coal sector to reach net zero earlier in 10 years before 2060. So you will see the whole structure, you will see this is the coal. The black side is the coal. Coal will peak in 2030, roughly, while gradually coming down to still have some, because we need the coal power as a balance force, right? Because coal is very stable. And then we have oil and also peak, and natural gas power generation. So most of the majority will move to non-fuel, basically on the hydrogen, on the solar, wind, and the nuclear. So you will see also the structure change. Windmill and the solar take a big chunk of the whole thing, and also nuclear and will take an important role, and hydrogen as well. So the whole process is the primary energy will transform into the power. When the source of generation power change, from gas and from oil, natural gas to more solar, windmill, and others, then downstream industry have to move to the electricity-based and the industry, right? And then in the transportation sector, construction sector, and urban sector also move to an electricity-based energy, right? Then another way is the energy efficiency improve, and also plan more trade, increase the carbon sink. So all those things will go together step by step. The first, most step issues is to make a green power. So you will see when the emission going down, I take example, this electric car in terms of percentage of the sale and total stock will increase gradually along with the electrification, right? So that's the path. China has a huge space for solar, right? You know, you see the brownless winds. We use only roughly 10% of the Chinese land. We can produce enough solar, and today the solar cost was quite low. It's only roughly 1% since 10 years ago. Right. In China, Qinghai, solar is only 24 cents RMB a kilowatt. In Sichuan now, it's lower than 15 cents RMB. Still a little bit of higher than in Portugal and the EOA we observed today is really the lowest cost. But the solar cost today, this level is lower than coal power already. With this study, we found even in Qinghai, the solar power, transformed into Henan, landed in Henan, the cost is lower than the coal power generated in Henan, which is roughly 38 and 40 cents now. The real challenge is really distribution and the network balancing capacity, because the stability is really the key issue. But the production cost is way low now. It gives us a huge space. China also have a huge potential for wind power, right? Inland, you will see in the north part of China, which the wind power is quite strong, and also in the west, east, and in the coast area also, wind is very strong. So the whole idea is we try to speed up, install the wind power and the solar power, right? Roughly from current 44 gigawatt per year and 20 gigawatt, double. Windmill will even more than double, 3 times in averaging per year. So increase the non-fuel energy is the real issue, which is try to capture up to meet energy revolution, reduce the coal, because the whole things, China will continue to consume energy because of growth. So you need a new primary energy, which is you need to speed up the construction and building the power base of the coal and solar. When you have a power, the next step is reshaping the whole economy. The whole economy will decarbon. Right? You will see this is a little bit of captures. This is a little bit of here is on the carbon think, but the whole industry, whole constructions, and whole transportation, and particularly the power section and the carbon emission will drop dramatically. So the whole sector have to go through the decarbon process. That means the whole sector have to go through a technology transformation and bring in the efficiency and the green transformation as not only the power, but more transportation, construction, agriculture. It's the whole economy, which is a really big thing. The roadmap will say the electricity will play a major role in transportation, I see, and construction. So I think electricity, this is darkening will play an important role. But we'll see hydrogen and also carbon capture will play the main role in the heavy industry, and the biomass is also in the chemical industry, and also the hydrogen will play also role in the heavy industry. This is by current technology and innovations. So different new energy will serve different purposes for different sectors, and the whole industry will change. When the energy change, the power generation structure will change, right? I mean, we will see in 2016, power is roughly, it's 2,000 gigawatt, and is that level. But most of it was produced by coal. But in 2015, the power generation will be roughly more than 3 to 4 times of 2016, but mostly generated by and solo by the windmills as well, right? So that will be totally changed. So this is the power generation structure will change. It's also big industry structure. In the transportation, the light road traffic basically we're moving away from gas to roughly electric power and a little bit of hydrogen. In heavy duty trucks, most of them will be hydrogen, right? In the ship will mix by synthetic resource and others. Airlines still a big challenge. You need a synthetic because you need a density of energy, which is the most important index. So developed electric car become the major issues. China plan to have electric car sales account roughly 40% of the total Chinese car sales in 2030. And last year, China sold 3 million electric cars already, which is really moved very fast, doubled almost. A year ago, it's only the 1.67 million, right? So now we reach 3 million. So I'm very much confident to see China will reach this goal. Sales account for 40% in 2030 electricity car and quickly. But it's not only car; it's the whole supply chain of the auto industry will change, right? And the renewable power, you will see, it really from everything, right? From circulations, from and the materials, and from process, and from fuel switch, and all things combined becomes, it goes to the carbon neutral. The whole supply chain will change when you change the gas car to electric cars, right? So it's a whole industry change, a major shift. And also hydrogen will become the main energy for chemical production. Hydrogen coal play two roles in chemical industry. One is processing energy. One is also raw materials. And hydrogen become the raw material, and hydrogen and the electricity become the process energy as well. So the chemical industry will have a big fundamental change as well. So in this process, China will gradually develop the new competitiveness of a low carbon industry. Yeah, moving away from like steel, glasses, cement. China produce more than 50% of the whole world, and China will export more new energies, PVs, wind, nuclear, hydrogens production. China today produce roughly 75% of global solar panels and the parts. Right? And China today's electric vehicle account of 41.27% of total global market. I think the Chinese electric vehicle will have a competitiveness in the near future. China also have strong internet, 5G, AI, which will combine with green technology will become another competitiveness. And actually high voltage for grid is another big issues for carbon neutrality transformation. Green infrastructure, China is really started doing now, and it's a few years earlier, accumulated a lot of experience, and green manufacturing is the key factor for Chinese economy move forward. So we hope in those areas we'll be able to build the competitiveness. So we are leaving the old competitiveness, from sort of a standard of industrial revolutions happening in UK, and move to the future competitiveness is much more green and low carbon. And I think that's the key issue. When you do that, the whole issue is you need a very broad technology innovation. The carbon neutrality process by nature is technology innovation driven, because you need the whole tech, right? And the tech is in the two sense. One sense is the pure technology in the carbon neutrality Another is to combine the green technology with the digital technology. China has a pretty strong digital technologies. In the past 10 years, Chinese economy moved quickly to the mobile internet side, which is combined internet, smartphone, and 4G. Right, we're moving very far on consumption side, on consumer service side, and also on the manufacturing side, IoT. But now, in the next 10 years, we'll see those digital technology will expand from 5G, big data, AI, to blockchain, to cloud computing, and become more and more sophisticated things. But they will combine with the carbon neutrality technologies and wind power and solar and energy storage, electric vehicle. It's all about the digital issues. So I think it combines two things is most important, exciting futures for the tech innovation. And there's a huge space we target today. The solar power, essentially hydrogen production from electronic water, which is still the issues. Hydrogen fuel cell. Hydrogen is a big thing because we see the efficiency and the low cost and the low emission. Nuclear fusion will be another big energy resource. A lot of studies on China. China is also at current at sort of tier 1 group that have its own experiments. Battery is a still issue. China do have advanced on battery issues, other energy storage methods, and heat pump, all those things. So there's a lot of space. But more broadly, on the policies, we launch a broader carbon neutrality technological innovation movements for the whole sector, encouraging all the sectors, electric fuel, zero carbon cement, because China produces 50% of global cement, zero carbon plastic. China consumes a huge amount of plastic because of the population base, and also zero carbon steel, zero carbon fertilizer, also another big issue because China consumes very high per unit fertilizer. And so make sure the fertilizer production becomes zero tiger. And the nuclear fusion, as I mentioned, heat storage is another issue. So there's a broad, almost everywhere. The goal is target for zero carbon. The instruments is technology innovation. So we'll move that induction in a mass way. It takes a very simple case in energy, right? In the solar and the hydrogen, the storage carbon, free energy new system. The system will have the energy productions, right? Wind, solar, and energy storage, and also hydrogen. So this is energy production is only the core, is one part. But it's really the digital economy, smart gateway, energy cloud, and the sanctions, power electronics, and all those things to manage the power is a big challenge. In today's world, we don't have the system can manage it. Say, if a grid supported by 90% of solar and the wind energy, because the volatility, right? So the stability, the balance is the most important thing. Then you need all the distribution, the technologies, all the digital, smart energy cities, green buildings, new energy vehicle. So at the end of the day, it's a digital economy combined with the green technology carbon neutrality. So in the 14th 5 years, the government recommended 5 major area technology innovation with particular technology we hope will be able to target to solve. Water is an area, energy of course, integrated green energy grid, which is most important thing, and emission cooling and heating, and it's also an energy internet. This is really, transportation is a big issue, and intelligent transport system. I think this is the big experiment in many cities, Hangzhou, Shanghai, and all the others. And the traffic demand management is also constructions, green building, and near zero energy building is also a big given the population base, China have a huge space on construction area. Land use planning, so because the agriculture produce roughly 19% carbon emission is another issue. The food is most important. We need to change the diet. We need to change the way to produce the food. So there's a lot of technology we specifically point out in these 5 years. We try to find a way to move forward. And on the fundamental research, China indeed leading in some way. For example, in solar energy, China published academic paper. Number is interim number is really ranked number 1. We'll see here. And number solar, and in terms of top 10 is number 1. Citation is still a little bit very low because the translation issue. On the wind energy, China's published academic paper also number 1. In the Geo Summit, China published paper also number 1, and also in the bioenergy, China too. So China actually really did a lot of fundamental researches on new energy sources, which will help to support energy transformation. I think this is a very important thing. So the last but not least issues also as very important is building a net zero financial system. As I said in the early, when I started my talk, where the money goes when economic activity runs. So you need to build a new financial system along with this huge economic carbon green and transformations. The financial sector will take the leading role. The financial sector will finance huge amount of long-term and high-risk investments. I think that's huge. The key was huge, long-term, and high risk, because of all innovation technology. The third thing is you have to manage all types of the balance sheets change due to the valuation change. I can see every balance sheet, country's balance sheets, company balance sheets, financial institute balance sheets, even personal balance sheets, because the high-tech assets, the value were low, and low carbon valuation will be high, right? The high carbon valuation will be low. So with this change, the whole balance sheets will change. So then it's very important. So financial sector managing transitional financial risk. The volatility, I think this is really a big risk. And also converging with the international standard. I see, like FIC TD and also standards just start to merge, and transforming financial institutions itself to net zero carbon standard. So financial sector played a very important role, also have a challenging things to do. China is a leader in the green finance. China have a RMB 15 trillion in green loans. It's the number 1 in the world, roughly 1.4 trillion green bonds RMB. It's sort of second largest one in the world, but overall still small, right? China's green credit account only 4.6% of the total social finance, and the green bonds account only 0.73% of total bond. So yes, it's big in terms of international comparison, but still relatively small in terms of the whole, the structure of a financing. And the banking account for more than 90% of green finance, which is obviously is not a risk measure, not a term measure as well. It's because bank is not very good, take a long-term and attack uncertainties and the risk as well. So we have to move to the new carbon sectors. The first is massive long-term and high-risk investments. Even the energy, right, in roughly 2050s, China will invest roughly 136 trillion RMB and a total roughly 170 trillion for the whole investments. This is a huge amount of money. How and where, and to find this money, move this money in what way, is a big challenge for financial sector and a huge space for innovations. And China also, and in the 14th 5-year plans, will specifically lay out investment. For example, 5G base stations, China will invest 2.5 trillion. End of this year, China will have 2 million 5G base stations, roughly account for more than 60% of global 5G station as well. Because this is a really important infrastructure for the carbon neutrality and the green economy. artificial intelligence and a big data center, which is another 2 trillion RMB, the data center, and industry internet, Internet of Things is another issue, and centralized distribution, renewable energy, power system, flexibility, smart grid. This is roughly around 5 trillion RMB. This is the most important challenge, because you can change the production of energy from coal to solar, but if you don't have the flexible smart grid, you cannot move power. It doesn't matter, right? So all those areas will put in, and digital upgrading is a major thing. So we put roughly 16.5 trillion RMB on try to improve the digitalization. And the digitalization can improve the energy efficiency in quite a dramatic way, which is really another dimension, to cutting the carbon emission. And we pay a lot of attention on those areas. But banking sector also have a huge task to change the balances. This is the 5 major, the black sector, the steel, the cement, the chemicals, the oil, power, and we take them together, which account, you will see in 2020 for 4 major Chinese commercial banks, it's really account half of their corporate loan. So that means half of their corporate loan will change values. And how can they support those sectors transform from high carbon to low carbon? How can they leave those sectors, move into the green sector? This is a huge challenge for financial sector as well. And also, so then the whole financial sector need to develop a strategy, path, and a policy framework. Currently, we are working on those issues. We need the financial sector have to go first. So we need to build a new risk appetite, incentive, disclosure still, service innovations, and the carbon neutral target is the most important thing. And we think about the structure monetary policy to support the carbon neutrality, and which is still macro, but also have a structure facings. And China used to have a sort of a window policies, and which matters. So now we have the structure monetary policy to support the SME, also support the green transformation as well. So roughly 2 pillar monetary policy probably will go to the 3 pillar monetary policy. And PBOC has a rich experience on this side. I think we will move into that direction. And also on the capital regulatory framework, we need to move in from Basel III to Basel ESG. When I was in the IMF, the Basel III also think about the move to Basel IV. I think it's extremely difficult for the financial system. It's really squeezing how to manage the Basel III already. But now I think the Basel III to move to Basel IV. So that's in terms of measurements and models, in terms of capital accuracies, in terms of reserve, in terms of disclosure, all will change. I think that is also the work we are doing now. So to fundamentally to lead the whole financial system to change. So Bert asked me to talk around 15 minutes. So I do talk the 42 minutes. I still have 8 minutes left. And I also amazed by myself. It's such a big topic I handle in roughly less than 45 minutes. So let me take the 3 minutes to conclude. The future has come, or the future is here already. I think the carbon neutrality is a paradigm shift. It's in human history since the Industrial Revolution. It is not forced, but it's not volunteered. I think this is the most exciting point. The technology is changing, as I mentioned. Production is changing. Consumption pattern is changing. Lifestyle is also changing. And the social organization is changing. And finally, the value proposition will change. The whole world is changing. The whole society is changing. Given it's 2060 or 2050, it's got to have a long tide. It's a long tide of carbon neutrality. I think that will continue. China is firmly committed because it's absolutely important. It's a global trend. It's absolutely important for Chinese economy move to high efficiency, move to green, move to high income level, and make people have a better living standard and the environment. So China's committed. So I think that will continue. But also from time and time, I expect to see long tide will be topped by huge waves. I don't know when, but I think that will happen. But the Tsinghua is a very, a university focused on a theory on the nature science. Our general estimations today in terms of carbon neutrality, roughly 1/3 of technology we know we are using, 1/3 we still do the research, we sort of know the direction, but another 1/3 we have no idea what type of technology will be there, right? So when technology change, the policy change, industry change, so we have a huge waves along this long tide. But I'm confident, I think China will fulfill its commitment because it's important for international community. It's a global trend, but also important for Chinese economy, for the efficiency, and for the people's living standards, much more green, better, and high and environment. So China will meet 2060 carbon neutrality. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Zhu Min. This was a fantastic lecture. I learned a lot, even though I studied China already a lot, and specifically in this area, but I see the progress and the speed with which China is moving. That is very impressive and also very encouraging, and also something that the world can learn from. We have a fantastic audience, I have to say. It is a mix of academics, public policy practitioners, and people from the financial world and otherwise. So I will jump right in with the questions, and I'll start with, well, some of them are challenging questions, I have to say, but I'll start with one that is really stems from this week's presentation of Li Keqiang's government work report. Now, it seems that China moved away a little bit from its targets. They say, well, maybe we exclude some coal and some gas, and maybe not have an annual target like last year. There is the 5-year target, of course, the 14 5-year plan. But is China loosening up the targets, maybe because of the current complex environmental situation?
Well, I don't think we'll lose the target. And I think the most important target is really the peak 2030 and also 2060 carbon neutrality. I think that's the most important target. But in the real life, I think we'll still have, moderate and even strong growth. So this year we target 5.5% growth, which is very strong, right? After 8.1% growth last year, and the world average 5.5. After 3.7% GDP growth rates a year 2020, the world is negative 3.4. Well, this is a very strong growth, and we have a strong growth. So you need energy, right? So this is a real. So I think balancing these two things is most important challenge. It's not only in terms of aggregate number, but also in terms of structure. Every sector, every province, have to balance each other, which is not easy. We had experience, right? You may have heard coal and power volatility in last fall, right? The reason is we are too eager to control the energy consumption and the carbon emission, or too committed to this target. So we use the two key variables as a target for the year 2021, which is total energy consumption. Second one is energy efficiency for the per capita GDP productions, So because the technology is not there yet, so when people are very serious about these two numbers, they slow down the growth. And they also cause volatility in energy supply. This is the most difficult thing. So given today's situation, you will see UK getting the coal back, and also the German is think about slow down the denuclear and the power as well, right? I mean, you have to manage your daily life first, right? When you think about long term, I think get real. So that's That's the most important thing I learned from my PhD thesis advisor. But anything you do theoretical study, you have to get real. So I think that's the issue. For this stage, we realized the most important thing is form the strategic plan. You need a plan, give the people guidance with transparency. On the, I think the target still clear, but we now in the early, I mean, it's not only today, I think even in the next few years, you know, it will take 2 to 3 years to get all detailed plan. And so on, I think that's the most important thing to figure out the whole, the action plan and will look like, at least with a certain degree for accuracy to guide the whole economy to move. I think that's the issue.
Appreciate that. On the let's talk a little bit about the instruments. And you've given a very good view on the targets and some of the technologies that would go in there, the sectoral shifts that would go in there. But what about the policy instruments? And Martin Reiser, who is with the World Bank, I don't play favorites, but he is with the World Bank in Beijing, and Professor Benjamin Kishore, who is at the Lee Kuan Yew School, they have the question. So Martin asked the question, can we do without a major increase in the price of energy? And China has always been hesitant, other countries as well, but China has been hesitant in majorly increasing the price of carbon, if you want. And it shows in the current carbon market, $7.50, $8. That's clearly not enough. And Ben Kishore asked, what does China do on the regulatory side? Is it choosing more of a regulatory path rather than a price path? And how will that work out?
No, this is the most important policy issue. And thanks, Martin, and thanks for sure. I cannot see you, but it's really nice to know you are here. Obviously, Martin is a real expert in these areas. I hope I will have a chance to hear your comments and your criticize later in Beijing, which is easier for us to meet to have a cup of coffee or tea. I know you are the coffee drinker, I'm the tea drinker. Yeah, I drink tea. Pricing is the most challenging policy instruments, but it's the most easy policy instruments. Because, I mean, in today's technology, we can easily figure out what will be the green price for each product, which is not a challenge. I think 10 years ago, maybe it's a challenge. Today is not that terribly challenging. But really issues, you increase the price if you announce a price, you mess up the whole economy overnight. Because existing market structure, supply and demand, will run into a very chaotic situation, right? And the old contract will no longer work. Nobody wants to see that happen. I think that's the most, so that's the reason the carbon taxation is the most popular issue have been discussed, but all the government are very careful to take that on the, into a real theories and implementations. You have to maintain the market, maintain the price stability as well. So I think that's the key issue. So there are several ways to do that together. One is trading system is one thing. You're right, the Chinese ETS doesn't work very well. The price is $7.5, it's way low. The euro has jumped to 100 now, which is from 50 and double. And you can talk about even earlier why. I think the market is still in the infancy stage in China. The most important thing is we don't have infrastructure, we don't have data. To run the market, we need the data. First, you may recall, I think in the late 90s, it was in Ireland and in Australia to build the first the carbon trading system, right? The price was, I think at that time was $13 now. It's not too low at that time, right? But after roughly a few years, it's gone, right? because I mean, you don't have infrastructure to support. I think that's the whole thing. So China take a gradual approach. So I think on the trading system, China will expand the scope. I think is number one, and bring more, not only the power generators and the companies, power company, electricity company, but also all I call the black industry companies gradually move in, bring them more incentive, redefine the cap, change the auction scheme. All those we can all introduce into the system, and furnish the market, gradually move into the mature market. I'm sure along with that, the price will increase, but also along with that, develop a derivative market for the carbon trading is also important, right? You need a derivative market, but you need information, you need data, you need a model, which is not easy. So meanwhile, this takes time. You need a policy, as Kishore mentioned, you need a regulatory side things to make sure, particularly the black industry, will slow down the emission gradually, or cutting their capacity, move into the new thing, and also encourage the green power generation as well. Right, this policy also play the role. I think that's also the regulatory side. You also need to bring the incentive scheme to different. For example, China subsidized electric car, in a nice way, and the solar patch, right? But now it's all gone because you can see they can compete at the market already, right? But now you need to subsidize something else, right? You need to subsidize, for example, chemistry companies moving away from coal to hydrogen, for example, right? So those things are changing, policy will change, but incentive is also important. I think we are at the very early stage. We are running a huge scale economy. Cautious is really needed. So we take a gradual approach, use multiple instruments, and step by step move into an ideal world. We even don't know what will be the ideal policy combination.
Zhu Min, can I ask you to stop sharing? Then we have a bigger picture of you and of me, unfortunately. But can you stop sharing your slides? That would be helpful for us.
Oh, sorry, I should do that.
No, I should have asked before, but I didn't. Let's move to the next question. That goes to the finance question. And again, I am really impressed by what China has done domestically on the regulation on the financial sector, but also internationally, because they took really the lead in the G20 and beyond. Now, Jeffrey Jainchobaki of GIC and Tony Neal asking more about this financing. You mentioned it has to be big, it has to be high risk and long term. Now, big is something that the Chinese financial sector is. It's over almost 200% of GDP, but it's also a banking sector. Largely, the financial system is largely a banking system. Can the banking system actually take on the type of risk that China needs at this point in time, the type of risks that come with innovation, the type of risks that come with new technologies that need to be introduced, and how does it look from a policymaker's point of view?
Good point. Good point. Let me say a few numbers. The first number I gave you is a 180 trillion RMB investments in roughly 30 to 40 years, right? The total, even in energy sector, will be 130 to 50 trillion. That's a huge. But there are roughly 325 trillion financial assets in China, which will move because the valuation changed, right? So I think that's also a big number. Now, who can provide those financing and who can do the risk management? I think Jeffrey and Tommy and all the others, I think, really ask the key issues. China is a banking-centric financial system, right? China has the largest global banking system in the whole world, and the banking economy more. In the green finance, as I mentioned, the banking sector accounts 90%, which is even higher proportionally than the banking sector into the whole financial sector, right? But the bank is not good for the long-term, high-risk, high volatility, lending things, right? This is risk match, term match, all those things. I don't think a bank can do that. So we need to really, really think through, develop the new market. The bonds market is one issue. The green bonds is really the big issues. There's still, China's although have the second largest green bond market in the market, but it's not international standard aligned in some way, because in some way China allow, for example, operational money, if we for the green company become the green bonds, which is not in the European standard as well, right? So bring the Chinese green bonds market into the international standard, converging with that standard, I think is number one. And learn from each other, merge each other to build the China green bonds, become the part of the global market. I think is also important. Build a new incentive scheme, new regulatory framework, a new index products. Shanghai just launched a new index product just a few days ago. I think it's also very important. And I think the bonds market is very important. The equity market is tricky, but also important. But also, another important issue is you need to bring in the government money. You need the public money joined with the financial, private monies to support the capital, not the loan. You think about the UK, right? For 100 years, it's really the capitalist, right? It's a market-driven financial institution. But UK built the first state-owned the green bank now, yeah, and to support the green finance. I think it's fine because it's the nature. I appreciate the UK authority, the flexibility or change with the environment, because the green finance nature need the public money, hybrids mixed with private money to move together. I think Europe will go in the same thing. US probably will go in the same thing, and China need to further develop there. In the province level, China has a lot of PPP now. PPP is a local government, central government, and also financial authority to support the green initiative. China is big. I think the only one thing probably will not serve the whole economy well. So we always say we need all those different instruments together. But definitively, we need the banking sector to support, but the banking sector alone is not enough. It's not a good vehicle as well. We need equity market. We need a bonds market. And we need a sort of public-private partnership, which are the most important thing.
Thanks. There is, as you say, quite a few of those, some good, some less good, of the public-private partnership in China. But moving on to the next question of Zhao Jiaqi of the IMF. The question is, look, and it builds upon what you previously said. The question is, look, there is a lot of this. The energy transition is very challenging, as you pointed out, but there's also a lot of volatility in the market. More so now with Ukraine happening, huge volatility in the energy markets, and at the same time we have this objective of Xi Jinping himself that says, well, look, we need to do it gradually. We need to ensure stability. But that's so both are, I'm not saying in conflict, but they're very hard to coordinate. And you can come to a situation where it's never a good time to move ahead with the targets. How in the government of China, do you know how that is coordinated? What is the institutional underpinning of actually delivering on the targets and then making these trade-offs with the economics and with incidental volatility?
Well, thank you. Thanks to Mr. Zhao from IMF. It's a midnight now in DC, and it's quite late. Thank you for joining this session, and you are my old colleague. I'm not sure whether met at IMF or not, but I think that's the key issue. The commodity market, the energy market, experience a huge volatility. I think the volatility will continue. Yeah, because when you have a carbon neutrality, what we observed in 2021, even before the nuclear crisis, so everybody rushed out of coal as a temporal substitute. Where you don't have all the solar and all the windmill, move into the natural gas. which pushed the price of natural gas very high already. I think which is a very reasonable choice, right? Because get real, as I said, right? But with this crisis, I think the energy prices will be even more volatile. And in this situation, not only China, I think the whole world will take a stability at the top. I think stability is still the key issue. Maintain the stability of energy supplies, maintain the stability of growth, maintain the stability of people living standard, and also with growth. I think this is the most important thing. So yes, you see the energy volatilities, you see the transformation is not smooth, but I think the key issues, the stability is the most important thing. But meanwhile, as I just mentioned, we will still keep and firmly keep the target of 2030 peak and 2060 neutrality. I think that's the important concept. We need a certain flexibility in these few years because change in the external environments, and also because we are not fully prepared for this huge transformation. But it will not change our determination to meet the target in 2030 and 2060. I think that's important. So I'm not terribly worried about the short-term issues. Yeah, as long as we can learn and from those volatilities, as long as we learn more and better understanding our own economy in terms of energy consumption, in terms of efficiency, in terms of technology innovations, we are preparing ourselves in a better path to move to the carbon neutrality.
Aside from the global goals, there's another related issue that has big international effects, and that is trade. Now, in your chart, actually, your chart was very striking, where the carbon intensity of China's economy shot up after 2000, i.e., when China entered the WTO, and a lot of carbon-intensive industries moved to China. The net balance is actually it's actually becoming more, if you want, China produces as much as it consumes, more or less. But there's a lot of talk in Europe about a carbon border adjustment mechanism, we'll call it a tax, a carbon tax at the border. What's the discussion in China about that? And are they basically in agreement with it? If so, what would they do to accommodate that? If not, what are the consequences of such a carbon border adjustment?
That's a very important issue. The carbon neutrality certainly will impact on global trade system because it changed the whole rule. The old kind of rule is based on the industrial revolution, starting in UK, right? As I said, it's all gone. We need a new rule. But what will be the new rule is still need to think through, need a negotiation, need to put all the human wisdom together. So I think we're against the board, sort of tax adjustment things. I think it's for one country or one region take that one, and it's not fair, it's not equal for the whole thing. We need a WTO sit down to think on the negotiation, the whole package to meet everyone. If you're looking for the number, it's very interesting. A study shows 19% of Chinese carbon emission was embodied in China's export goods. So China emit all those carbon, because China produces heavy carbon products. And so exports to the other country, the countries enjoy those goods without emit the carbon account on their own local status, right? China say, hey, this is not fair. For example, China produce more than 50 cement. Do you expect to see China continue to produce 50% cement? I don't think so. Someone have to do it. China will produce another 50% glasses of the whole world? I don't think so. So I think that's the key issue. The world have a whole picture to understand those situations, to have a proper role. Meanwhile, we see Tokyo agreements actually give the low-income country and the developing country a sort of a leeway, a space, if they can produce the green things, they can sell the carbon quotas, getting the financings from the advanced economy, which also helps a lot. So if the country or one of the Europe countries, UK, say, okay, we take the board adjusted tax, but we target those revenue 100% return to the developing country to help them to do the carbon reduction. I think that would be nice, right? And the UK always think they are doing the great things for the global public affairs. That probably can be one thing they can do. I think a Kyoto Compact is one thing, Accord is one interesting example, although the policy no longer exists now, but they do help. I also see market change. I'll give you one example. One company produced aluminum in Shandong. You may heard name called Weiqiao. The Wei Bridge, I don't know what is English name. In Chinese, Weiqiao, translated into pure English, Wei Bridge, right? They produce aluminum export to Europe. And you also say, wait, at the gate say, you use the coal power, you have to pay the tax. So the company say, wow, if we pay the tax, we don't have a revenue, profits, right? We probably will not doing that. So they found in Yunnan province, because Yunnan is rich on the hydrogen, power, and a lot of surplus. So they moved the whole production assembly from Shandong to Yunnan. Now they use the green power, they can export to the Europe now, once again, continued. Then the Shandong province, the authority, gosh, what if all my company move to Yunnan? What do I do, right? You will see very interesting situations. So a very senior people talk to me and say, hey, what do you think? I said, well, we have to build a green power. So they bring they build the grill directly from Qinghai solar power in Shandong to provide the green power to the Shandong company for export to the global market. You see, all those things are happening. I don't think the board adjustment tax is a good thing, only for one country, one region. I think they should give this money to all the low income, poor income as well. I think the WTO need to bring all the members together, theorists, think about drive a new global trade, on the deal. I think that's one issue. But also I see we need a new global trade with standard carbon emission standard, so which will also in some way serve a force for the market change and economic transformation.
Well, I find your idea of returning the money to the developing countries very innovative and very, very helpful. I think we also have to live in the real world, though, that global trade deals that incorporate many other aspects of trade and carbon, frankly, in today's world may not be feasible. So that's why some countries might move ahead with some of these mechanisms. And as you say, in China itself, there's lots of adjustments that are reacting to the relatively moderate pricing of the domestic carbon market. Dr. Zhu Min, you've been very kind to stick to your time. I stick to my time of 30 minutes of Q&A. We still have many more very interesting questions. I would like to thank the audience first for coming, but second for bringing fantastically interesting questions to Dr. Zhu Min. I greatly enjoyed the discussion. I greatly enjoyed the presentation. And I would like to thank Dr. Zhu Min for delivering the Keng Swee lecture for this year. And I do hope that soon we can meet again somewhere live in either Beijing or in Singapore or somewhere else in the world. And that holds for many of my friends in the audience as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Zhu.
Thank you. And thanks for the Institute to host me, and also thanks for all the audience for the very exciting conversation. I really learned a great deal from this conversation. And this is a big issue. It's a global issue. And I hope we all will continue to exchange the thoughts and ideas on those very, very important issues. And China will obviously continue to open exchange with the whole world, because only that way we'll be able to reach the global carbon neutrality, as well as China's carbon neutrality as well. Yeah, once again, first, thank you very much.
Thank
also,
you so much.
Thanks to Dr. Peng for the kind words of introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhu.